my potential vision for what some organizational learning could look like. We could have holograms. We could have an AI coaching component behind it. We could have a coach that learns about each individual employee and what makes them work. We could put people in realistic situations. We could give them guidance and feedback. There are technology barriers to some of the things I talked about. But what about organizational barriers? So I'm curious to know how people feel about things like, how do people feel about change in organizations? So much people are unhappy with page-turning online learning, right? E-learning has gotten a bad name, and deservedly so, for the page-turning stuff. We see that memorizing information and taking a test on it doesn't help people perform the job, doesn't help them feel valued, doesn't help them feel great about their position. But what can you get that will actually get rolled out? So I don't know if other people have visions for what you think organizational learning will be like in your company in the next few years, but I'm curious to hear what you think can really happen. I tend to think about what I think should happen, and it doesn't always go that way. There are definitely things I said 20 years ago that I still think should happen, but they did not, in fact, happen. So I'm curious to hear other people's opinions. So it's the end of the day, so I'll see if anybody wants to give an opinion, and if not, I'll just talk a little more, and then we'll get on to the drinks. Thanks. We're back down to one microphone.
It's just a question.
Sure.
Yeah, we've spoken so much about companies. How about students, in fact? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in my talk, I talked a little bit about students as well. I mean, the focus of this conference is a little bit more on, on workplace. But, I mean, I think all of that applies. I actually think one of the things I think we see, certainly in the US a little bit, is the idea that people tend to tune out a little bit in school, maybe even more than they used to. There's a lot of pressure from a really young age, to get into the right college. And there's a lot of disparity between who gets what kind of education, and that's where technology, I think, has the potential to really help, because sometimes you'll get, everybody doesn't have an equal chance. And right now, I was fortunate as a kid. I mentioned in my talk, I went to this elementary school that was progressive, and we had these fantastic teachers and project-based curriculum and all this kind of stuff. But that wasn't, I mean, I was lucky my family could afford it. They could barely afford it, by the way. My father borrowed money from his father that I will always be thankful for. But they could barely, but they could afford it. Not everybody had that opportunity. I lived in a place where they had this school and they were able to get me into it. So one of the things that I think technology can help us with is provide a bit, be more of an equalizer. So if you can build some more things into technology that do feel human, to, limit the disparity between people who have access to great teachers and people who don't. And I think that's definitely an issue in the US, and I suspect it probably is everywhere. But that's a great question. I also think that can then carry over. So if you put people in a situation where they have better learning experiences as a kid, they're prepared to both enjoy those as they get into the workforce and also design them as they get into the workforce. So, it's so easy to fall back on designing things that look like what you had, right? So if you memorized things and took tests, you think, that's the fallback, right? And a lot of things are like that. The technology that's out there often supports that. But a lot of it comes from, what did you grow up doing? I think there's also the side effect, I think, of the idea that learning is supposed to be difficult, and not necessarily in a good way, but sort of in the unpleasant way, right? So I know we see this, right? I know we see people who feel, well, yeah, it's unpleasant. I had to do it. You'll have to do it. Right? So we want to get out of that. That is not healthy. First of all, I don't think that's a healthy attitude, period, that just because we endured something as kids, that we should then insist that the next generation also endure anything that was, unpleasant for us, right? I don't think we feel like, there is this sort of, we paid our dues, everybody else should do that. I don't agree with that. But you see a lot of it. And the more we can get better learning experiences at a large scale into schools, people growing up, I think that helps prevent some of that that's a little bit human nature, maybe more than we like. So my thoughts on that. It's a really interesting question. All right. Anything else people want to cover? This is the time where nobody wants to cover anything except wrapping up the day, I think. So I think I'm going to end on that note. Thank you so much for being with us throughout this day, much as you were here. I enjoyed the afternoon, all the talks, and hope you did as well. So enjoy what's left of the show and your evening and the drinks and everything else. Thanks again for being here. Please stay in touch. Find me on LinkedIn or wherever else, and hope you enjoyed all of this. Thanks again, everyone.